Hi, everybody. It's Susan again, and I'm emerging from the depths of my writing bolt hole. I've been away now for a couple of weeks, focusing on writing. I'm getting a lot done, and now I've actually completed the translation part of the book, and I've done a lot of my own writing. So I'm going to carry on with that for another month or so. My aim is to try and get the book done by the end of the month and then do all of the prettying up through September and get it out in September. So that's the plan. But as we'll see today, when I look at the astrology, this may not work for me because actually I am one of these people who embodies the Jupiter-Saturn square. If you were born in early 1966, you do too. And so Jupiter Saturn is exactly where, not just off a couple of degrees, especially for Jupiter, where my own natal Saturn and Jupiter are. So that, of course, means that I'm also having my Saturn return, and you will be too, again, if you're born in early 1966 now. Um, so where to begin? I just wanted to check in. I actually had tried to avoid doing any videos, but honestly, August is pretty important. It's pretty exciting stuff, and I wanted to just add my 2 cents to the conversation. So for those who don't know me, thanks for being here. And I am a consulting astrologer. I do enjoy working one-on-one with people. Not a huge fan of being on YouTube. I'm a very shy person. Generally speaking, I prefer the intimacy of small groups and individual sessions. But here we are. This is modern life, and we have to adapt. That's part of the Jupiter-Saturn square energy as well, as you'll see. In mutable signs, we do what we have to do, and we're pretty adaptable. So we'll have a look at how that's applying to all of us, and especially those of us who have a lot of mutable energy. Of course, the mutable signs being and Gemini and Pisces, Sagittarius. Sorry, that's out of order. Gemini, Sagittarius. I'm forgetting one. Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. There we go. The two Mercury ruled signs and the two Jupiter ruled signs. My brain is a bit fried, to be quite honest. Working 8-hour days on the computer and on writing is exhausting me. So that's another reason you haven't seen me for a while. So let's hope I get through this because I've also got Neptune on my Mercury. So there we are. Fair warning, this is my year. Right, but this is not about me, despite the introduction. I do want to introduce to you the upcoming eclipse trend because we're already, as far as I'm concerned, moving into eclipse season. I do feel we need to give it a good leadway, at least a month of leadway because that movement into the eclipse energy and out of the eclipse energy matters, and especially when the energy of the eclipse is so tied with the energy of the very important aspects that are happening in August. So I want to give you an idea, especially as we're looking at a long, extended period of several months of transition, how you can work with this energy, both personally and collectively, how we're dealing with this. I have tried to avoid mentioning anything about the elections. I have put that in different videos that I've done earlier in the year around, especially the US now. Most of the world is having elections this year. We've already seen quite a lot of major ones, for example, in India, the UK, and France, for example. But lots and lots of people are going to vote for what it's worth. I don't think it's worth very much these days, to be honest, but there we are. Um, Now, I will, however, have to dip my toes in and again add my 2 cents about Kamala Harris because I'm not sure that the way things are panning out right now is the way things will be panning out. I do believe that there's going to be some prevention or some obstacle or some kind of confusion around the US elections that's not going to allow them to go forward as they would normally. So, keeping in mind that basically since the year 2000, American elections have been deeply disrupted and even outright stolen, um, starting in the 2000 election. And so it's not a recent phenomenon. If you've been paying attention, you will know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to go deeper into that. I am not interested, by the way, in your political situation. This is not political commentary. It is about the way that we can see how things are manifesting through the astrology. This is really just to show how, let's say, how we need to think differently going forward about elections and about what you might consider to be our dear leaders. And I use that expression advisedly. So given that Kamala Harris is such an important figure right now, and I want to just simply show how her chart is being, I think, adversely affected by some of this. There's a lot of hype around her, a lot of excitement about a female leader and so on, but I do not think this is going to go well for her, or for anybody, for that matter. And again, this is not a political statement. This is based on what I see in the astrology. Um, right, so where to begin? I will begin at the moment that we're in. I'm just speaking to you now on the 6th of August, and we are building now to this conjunction between Mars and Jupiter. I'm going to first give a general overview of the energies. I'm going to tie it into the eclipse, and then I'm going to try and pull it through sign by sign. So this could be a long video. But I figured I'll just show up for one long video and throw it all at you all at once, and then go back in hiding for maybe another couple of weeks or something like that. So I'd like to remind you my channel is not monetized. And so your likes and your comments really do help me, because YouTube doesn't really promote non-monetized videos. I do that for ethical reasons, because I believe in right livelihood, and I don't believe that Google is a good source of income. And you can find out on another search engine, because you won't find out on Google why I believe that Google is not a good source of income. Anyway, so coming back to right now, we are building up to really actually quite pleasant time. We're in the middle of a new lunar cycle that happened on Sunday over into Monday, depending on where you were, the 4th or 5th of August. We're just emerging at the phase now where the moon comes out. And I've always said to people, traditionally, you would never really want to undertake something until about the 3rd lunar day after a lunation, especially after the new moon, because you want to see the moon in the sky before you actually start anything. I also didn't want to do this video on Sunday. To be honest, I was prevented from doing it. It was when Mercury stationed retrograde, Sunday, the 4th. And again, that would depend on where you live. It may have been the 5th for you. But I am dog sitting as well as doing a bit of books. So this week we're looking after 4 dogs who are all somehow emotionally needy, or perhaps have become emotionally needy, or they've discovered that I'm a soft touch with a Cancer rising and moon, and that I give treats just to basically keep them away from me, which actually has the perverse effect. So here I am trying to get anything done. And as Mercury stationed, I just had to give up on the idea of it. I don't know what your Sunday was like, but I just thought, never mind. Mercury's in my 3rd house as a Cancer rising. Communication was dog-based on Sunday, and I couldn't get anything else done. So there we are. So Mercury is retrograde, and that's important because Mercury is throughout the month until the 28th, 29th, again, depending on where you are, it's ruling Jupiter retrograde, and it's also ruling Mars while Mars is transiting through its sign of Gemini. So Mercury is in a very strong position, stronger because it's retrograde in the sign of both its domain, but also or domicile, you could call it, but also its exaltation. And when a planet is retrograde, it's stronger because it's closer to the Earth. And so we're getting the full effect of a Mercury retrograde in its own sign. That Mercury is also backing up into Venus. Venus is moving towards Mercury, and Mercury is backing up into Venus, and that you will experience on the 7th or 8th. So just tomorrow or the next day, depending on when you watch this. Today, as I'm doing this, the moon is also conjoining. Moon is not particularly happy or unhappy. Moon tends to like earth signs, so the moon is just kind of tagging along. But that also is just part of this particular story at this moment. So this Mercury retrograding, again, is a big part of why a lot of the things that are happening right now are not going to be the way that people expect them to be, because there's quite a lot of experience of newness and instability in the energy. So we've got a mutable Mercury retrograde. We've got a mutable Jupiter, not in great dignity because it's in the sign of its opposition. It rules Sagittarius, and it's therefore in detriment in Gemini. And we've got Mars in Gemini, where it's not very happy because Mars in Gemini can be a little bit stroppy, can be a little bit gossipy. We see that on the on the news as well. Can be a little bit bitchy, let's face it. And so that Mars, of course, ruled now by a Mercury retrograde, is also going to be saying and doing things that it would maybe regret a little while later. So bear that in mind if you need to do anything. I'm doing revision, editing, I'm rewriting things. So let's call that a very helpful, good use of that. Again, I'm Cancer rising. So for those of you who are Cancer rising, this would be with Mercury in the third house, which is strong for writing, communications, and so on. And then the Jupiter Mars in the 12th, which is good for research and for closeting yourself away with four dogs and trying to get anything done. So just keep that in mind only for those Cancer risings. And if you are working from the solar or the lunar, it also applies to your sun and moon by derivative house. But we'll go sign by sign. Don't worry. I'm going to come across all these things in detail for each of you. All this to say that this is a time where there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of speech, a lot of communication, a lot of decisions that will not hold or that will become later on evident that they were a little bit overly optimistic, over the top, overly expansive. And then when we cross over from the Mercury, Moon, and Venus, we find Saturn in Pisces. Now, Saturn is retrograde as well. And Saturn is going to put a brake on a lot of this. So that is one of the, let's say, the fortunate aspects right now, just given the over-the-top kind of energy that we may be experiencing this weekend, next particularly, as Mars gets closer and closer to that Jupiter. And because Mercury being retrograde, it will probably do something that will not lead to a final conclusion or to something that we can genuinely say is either a finished product or a finished decision. Or if the decision is made, again, in future, let's say transits, future impacts of Mercury or Mars, it will have to be undone. It will show up as not being helpful. Now, there we are. That's one of the backgrounds, let's say, to all of what I'm going to say going forward. So keep that in mind because these are interesting and unstable times. Then as Mercury backs into Leo, where it's going to actually continue its retrograde until the 28th and then station direct and turn back around, it will, of course, square Uranus. So that again adds to this edgy and slightly unpredictable, rather very unpredictable nature of the times that we're in. So again, bear that in mind. We're in a period of time, not just because Mercury is retrograding through Virgo, but when it goes back into the fixed sign of Leo, it will be squaring Uranus in the fixed sign of Taurus. And so again, very edgy, lots of change. Now, fixed energy, when it's asked to change, resists and struggles a little bit. And so that change can come with a little bit more difficulty, let's say. We now are in a period of a little bit more wobbliness, and sometimes that wobbliness can be useful, as in the sort of Chinese way of looking at it as, change and chaos leading to opportunity. And sometimes that wobbliness is simply wobbly and unreliable. So it's, again, circumstantial. It depends a little bit where you are in that spectrum and also where our collective is in that spectrum. Let me just check my notes because I was hoping to be a little bit sequential so that this would be making sense it's very difficult in the sense that a lot of it ties into the future and loops back to where we are now. So I'm just trying to make it as sensible as possible. But think of it as thematic rather than necessarily specific, okay? And keeping also in mind that it's not only a Mercury retrograde and a Saturn retrograde energy that we're in, but it's also eclipse season, meaning that there's something here that is new and different. It's a North Node eclipse on the moon, and I think this has a lot to do with our nature, our collective nature. A moon representing the populace in mundane astrology. What will I do now? Perhaps what I'm going to do is I'm going to very briefly touch on Kamala Harris. Again, my intention going forward is to extract myself almost entirely from political and mundane stuff because I'm finding that it just ends up being people are just too emotionally immature and unable to hold opposing ideas in their minds. And especially, it just makes for more tension. And my aim in all of my work is to try and find harmony, to try and bring people into a more harmonious place in life. So if I'm contributing even indirectly in sowing disharmony, it's not what my higher purpose is. So I'm going to only just every now and then jump in and touch on these things. And I know a lot of you would like to hear more mundane stuff. I think I won't be doing much more of that because it's not really helpful because people just can't somehow abstract from their own personal politics. Right, let me just call up Kamala. There we go. Kamala Harris is born on the 20th of October 1964, 2128 in Oakland, California. So this gives us this chart. Let me just we'll just pull Kamala into the spotlight here. And so just to help you understand, her ascendant is a Gemini ascendant with the North Node on the ascendant. This means that what she's doing overall in life is having to move towards standing her own ground and having a sense of personal identity. Um, and it's not that easy with a Gemini rising because there's an enormous amount of uh, instabilities, that mutability again, the instability around what one wants. And so there's an interesting video that appeared. I follow Paul McCartney. It's pretty, let's say, pretty easy thing to mention here. Now, hopefully nobody is going to be screaming about Paul McCartney in the comments. Paul McCartney is a very strong Gemini, and he was asked, what do you prefer? I can't remember. It's one of these stupid videos where you're supposed to choose something. And the poor guy, clearly struggling to choose anything because he's a Gemini. Don't ask a Gemini to choose something on the spot. They will really have a hard time with that. Libra is the same, by the way, for different reasons. Libra is thinking about others, and Gemini is just thinking too much. So too many options for Geminis. Don't ask them to make a choice. And so this is Kamala. And what that means is with the South Node in the seventh house, on the descendant, very strongly on the descendant, she has a tendency to want to show up for other people and be who they need her to be. And that's a challenge. It's perhaps what you might describe as a good strategy as a politician, but it's not anything that gives you substance or reliability. She has both a struggling moon in Aries, and a sun that is also considered to be in its fall because the sun is exalted in Aries and it's in fall in Libra, and again that represents a condition of wanting to please other people, wanting to say things that other people want to hear. Again, this is astrology. This is not a political statement. I'm not a Trumper. I'm not a Putin apologist. I'm none of those things. I'm giving you what the astrology is showing me. The sun is trining Saturn. That's very helpful. It's a strong Saturn. It's in it's in its own sign. Again, very, very strong in Aquarius. And it's also an exaltation lord for Libra. So that helps. It gives her a structure. It gives her a sense of can do, right? That's very, very helpful. Mercury is ruled by Mars in her chart. Mercury's in the sixth house. Neptune is also in the sixth house, and those two things can also have one feeling like they're under obligation to do things for other people. Mercury is trining the midheaven, so again, a really important part of her persona is to be there in terms of engaging in communication. Here's me struggling with communication, expressing ideas, expressing things in her daily life, in work. But with Mercury and Neptune there in the sixth house, there can be this feeling of overdoing it, overgiving, especially because Mars is in the third house. Mars in the third house can be let's face it, a bit snappy. Not always on the straight and narrow, although it's in Leo. So that can also be quite stubborn at times. But the ruler of Leo, again, as I mentioned, is in its fall. It's not a strong rulership. Now let's look at what Venus is doing. Where's Venus ruling that sun in fall, which is ruling the Mars, which is ruling the Mercury? Well, Venus is ruled by Mercury. And she's in Virgo where she is in fall because Venus is exalted in Pisces. So this is not an ideal quality, and these are considered essential dignities. They're strong indicators of the outcome of the expression of those planets. This is not a judgment on character. It's an expression of the planet. What is the planet going to do for us? So when we have a moon ruled by Mars, which is ruled by the sun, which is not in good dignity, which is ruled by Venus, which is not in good dignity, which is ruled by Mercury, which is ruled by that Mars. Nobody's really in their happy place. Not easy. We see that in her challenges as she's trying to communicate. She often is not able to fully communicate. Her Jupiter, which rules her midheaven, is also ruled by that same Venus. Her Jupiter is retrograde in the 12th house, ruling the midheaven and ruling her 7th house and south node in the 7th house. So we see that there is a lot of challenge around what you might call one's capacity to find one's way clearly. So from a political position, that can be very helpful because politicians, as we all know, hopefully, will say whatever you want them to say. They're paid to play, and they will say whatever they need to say. So I want to emphasize again, this is not a political statement. This is a general statement, given our modern times and given the world that we live in. Don't wait for the Messiah. Everybody thinks, especially Americans, have this incredible tendency to spiritualize, somehow magnify their leaders. And we see that because Neptune is in the 10th house of the American chart. Again, that's another, you'll see that on other videos, so I'm not going to digress to that. But just to say, don't wait for your saviors. They're not coming. She has the moon and sun in opposition. That's a full moon person. And that also shows that her inner psychology is under tension all the time. There's a desire on one side that is never really fulfilling the need on the outside, the sort of psychological tension that she's carrying all the time. Not so easy. She married at the age of 50. So relationships are not easy for her for all the same reasons I've just outlined. Jupiter, which represents the husband for a female, a heterosexual female, is ruling the South Node on the descendant in the 7th house and ruling her house of social status, the Pisces 10th house. Again, it's a Jupiter that inherently is not in a bad place in terms of the Taurus placement, but it's ruled by a Venus that's not in her happy place, etc., etc. You just heard me go through the essential dignities. These are important. These are extremely helpful to understanding how a natal chart works. And I am trying to put this all in some kind of logical sequence in the book so that people can actually see these things and how they work out in a natal chart, to make it very practical. So now the other aspect of her chart is this is something I'm going to skip over what's going right now. Or can I? No, I can't because of that Chiron. So I'm not going to skip it over. Hang on. We're going to look at what's coming up. We're going to pull up, not just this moment, but I'm going to pull up the Mars and Jupiter conjunction. Now, this is going to be something to look out for. That's next week if you're watching this now in early August, it's the middle of August, so the 14th, as well as the 15th. So we're looking at a couple of days because we have a couple of, these are slower moving. They take a couple of days to fulfill, but even a couple of days before and after. So it's exact on the 14th, but let's go let's say from the 11th or even the 10th of August until the end of that week till the sort of 18th. Oh gosh, yeah, well into the 19th because we've got then. Let me just keep going. Let's start at the 10th of August, but I'm going to show you now the exact conjunction of Mars and Jupiter, keeping in mind that neither Jupiter nor Mars are in strong dignity. Mars itself is okay. And again, these things play out more, let's say, flexibly, easily in a natal chart than they do in an examination of our collective experience. So here we're looking at a natal chart. So this may work in her favor, but it also can be very challenging. So what I want to point out is that Mars and Jupiter are approaching her ascendant. Jupiter will not get there until 2025. Keep that in mind in terms of the elections. But they are squaring her Chiron. Saturn will be crossing her Chiron in the 10th house 3 times. Now, when Jupiter and also Mars, especially, but especially Jupiter, squares Chiron, often what we can have, and this can happen in a natal chart or if it's in a transit chart, there can be a tendency to not really feel that one can grasp or be connected, clearly connected to what one believes. And there can be a feeling of just not being up to the task, having bitten off more than you can chew. Now, this is going to be an ongoing feeling that she will have throughout 2024 and 2025. You are going to see her. Now, if you, again, this is apolitical. If you can take off your cult Democrat hat or your cult Republican hat just for a moment and step into a rational, neutral observer mode, you will see that she's out of her depth. I'm talking from a neutral observer mode. Just look at how the woman is answering questions, how she's trying to understand what's going on, how she deliberately has been sidelined because of this particular quality for the last 4 years, and notice that she is genuinely out of her depths. That is not an anti-feminist comment. It's not a political comment. It's an observer, rational observation. So again, I'll get flack for that either way. Now, again, that Saturn is going back and forth over that Chiron 3 times. So she's going to go through moments of doubt, self-doubt. Chiron in Pisces, especially Chiron in the 10th, is this feeling of not fitting in. I'm not a part of this crowd. I don't think I'm up to this task. So again, notice that the essential dignities show that a lot of the planets are not giving her the potential promise of some of those placements, some of those planetary placements. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of challenge around her capacity. Now, around the same time, we have Mercury, which has just crossed her IC and opposing the midheaven, and then will be opposing Saturn. So something's going to come up here that is going to challenge something that she has said or something that she needs to answer to. Information, let's say, it can be information about her, and it can be information that she is communicating. Something will come from the outside, it will come from another individual or the collective that she's going to have to contend with, because this same Mars and Jupiter conjunction is, and this is applying collectively, but I'm applying it to her chart, is in opposition to a Jupiter-ruled moon. So there's some impulsive quality, there's some impulsive or perhaps changeable quality around the nature of this connection, and that can also be around the public. This is in a square to Saturn, not so easy. The moon will very quickly be exactly squaring Saturn. This is it's just past its square to Chiron, and then the moon will be passing the south node, which it does every month for her, of course, but this time it will have been just after this, whatever this event is, as the moon is crossing the south node. The south node, or Ketu, is considered the enemy of the moon. So something here can provoke some kind of challenge that she will have to answer to, because by the time that moon is crossing the south node, then Mercury is also going to be in a trine, building into a trine to that moon as it enters into the 8th house of things that can be related to crises or challenges or things that are going on behind the scenes, wheeling and dealing, or whatever you might describe it as in terms of behind the scenes things that can also be issues of psychological nature, especially with regards to the moon, potentially, because Mercury is also involved. Now, the moon, by the time it moves into Capricorn, is not in good dignity. And then that will be squaring Neptune. So something is not going, I suspect that the midweek around that whole middle of August for Kamala Harris is not going to go very well. At the very least, on a personal level, I think she will be struggling. This is not a political comment. This is about her as an individual, as a human being. There's a human being behind this individual called Kamala Harris, and she's got to deal with her own life. She's got to try and grapple with all these things that she's being confronted with, which have been, put on an individual, let's say, who has a very strong sense of ambiguity around her own capacities. And I think this is one of the reasons why she's often challenged to speak up for herself. Her Mercury is also combust, just to keep that in mind as well. When Mercury is combust, again, it's not very clear. It's not a strong energy for communication as well. Mercury in the sixth, as I mentioned, with Neptune especially there can be this tendency of doing and saying things according to what other people might think you need to say or do. So you're not necessarily getting something on the straight and narrow. Right. At the same time as this conjunction, we've got this Sun in very strong dignity, Sun in Leo, transiting on her natal Mars. So there's going to be something about communication, about how she's showing up, that is going to be affecting her very particularly. It might be about choice or decision making. By the way, because Mercury is retrograde, I think she's still debating at this point. This is Tuesday, the 6th of August, as I'm doing this. So maybe around this time, she's going to make the decision about her vice presidential choices. I don't even know the names. I have never heard of these people that are being bandied about. I don't know where people fish up. I had this, as some of you already know, I studied international relations. I have a master's degree in international relations. I worked in international institutions. I worked in NATO. I worked in the European Commission for a number of years, long, long time ago, in another lifetime. So one of my favorite professors, Professor Gregor, who was a Czech, big booming voice with a strong Czech accent. Professor Gregor used to laugh and just say, what are these people that the American electorate just burps up in those were Reagan days. Those were the Reagan days. And now imagine Reagan looks like the, freaking best thing that ever happened to the US compared to what we've had in the meantime. But, the Reagan in his day was often mocked. Now, people don't maybe remember that, but he was slightly losing his grip on reality. And he was actually questioned. People in those days actually had the courage to point out that their leaders were, in fact, not compos mentis. This is no longer politically fashionable. You're not allowed to talk about that. But anyway, so those were those days. And I have never forgotten the way he said that the people that Americans can burp up out of a population of 300 and some million people, and they manage to fish out these individuals who are so usually very often very substandard compared to other countries' leaders. And I know that this is going to be a very controversial statement, so fire away in the comments. But just keep this in mind, because this individual, and it's not because she's black or brown or a woman or any of these, or Democrat or whatever, she is substandard. She is not leadership material. And we see that already in the natal chart. She was probably a very adequate administrator. That would be probably the best I could say. But she is not leadership material. Full stop. I have to say that. And that, again, not a political statement, just a statement based on the natal chart. Some people are here for certain things. Some people are here to lead. That's the way it goes. She's not. Anyway, her chart is very, very strongly affected. It is really something that is going to jump out in different ways. And I want to point out that there is a time later in October and in early November when her chart will be under immense pressure by a cardinal grand cross. That cardinal grand cross is going to be very personal to her. Jupiter will be at this point retrograding at that stage. So currently Jupiter is still moving direct. Saturn will still be retrograding. It will have already crossed her Chiron in the 10th house. Saturn is going very slow at this point because it will just be stationing to turn direct a couple of weeks later in November. So Saturn is going very, very slow, just creeping across her Chiron and in opposition to Uranus in the fourth house. Now, remember, as everything is in opposition as well, I didn't even mention this. Saturn not only is crossing um, her Chiron, but it's also going to be opposing her Uranus and Pluto as well as Venus, but that will get the exact again on the square at Christmas time, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. Things are going to go very, very differently to what people expect at this time. This grand cross is not going to be easy for her to bear. So you've got Mars in poor dignity in the second house, opposed by Pluto in the eighth house. That can be treachery. I'm speaking purely from a political point of view because it's squaring her Sun and Moon opposition. All right. And it's also in and out of sign square to her Mercury, but we're going to leave the Mercury aside for a moment. It's squaring her Sun and Moon opposition in a grand cross. So a grand cardinal cross. So this is very strong because that shifts energy very quickly. The cardinal energy shifts things very rapidly. Uranus will also be 3 times crossing back and forth over her Jupiter, which rules her midheaven, which rules her partnership house. Remember, partners of like her life partner, but also, of course, any partnership, political partnership, etc. Very important to observe what Jupiter, what the condition of Jupiter is, let's say, in terms of her career and in terms of partnerships for her. Who's got her back? I'm not so sure that she's going to have the back of the people who have her back right now. And I say this again, not as a political statement, based on the astrology alone. We've got Mercury now. She will have had her Mercury return. Just next week, she's having her Venus return. But in August and now in the end of October, mid-October, she will have had her Mercury return. Mercury is still in the sixth house and building to an opposition to that Jupiter. So I think there's something here that will mean that she's losing favor, she's losing support, or she will lose one way or another. She will lose a partner, perhaps, or she will lose some kind of status because of all of these changes. Whether that means that she stays on, but with a diminished status or whatever, I don't know. These are difficult to predict, but given that, the transiting moon at the same time is in opposition, it's moving to an opposition with Neptune, but more importantly, it's squaring her ascendant, descendant, and her nodal axis. It's a moon again in a Mercury-ruled sign. Not particularly bad. Moon in the fourth house, however, is unstable in general. Although it's the house of its rulership, it's not the house of its joy. And the moon in the fourth house can be challenging, could be very, very challenging. That moon is in a trine to Jupiter. This may be something that has to do again with some need for a change around her support or even her emotional situation. And that's going to be challenged by both then very immediately after this moment of the cardinal grand cross. Then she's also having a moon trine Uranus. So this is an emotionally edgy time for her. I feel for her as a person. Again, this is not a political comment. I feel for her as an individual. She will be under immense pressure, and it is actually not really in her character to be in this position that she has somehow been thrust into. So there we are. There is an aspect of her. I will one day do a natal chart reading based on the book that I'm writing and based on the significance of her family experience going back. But I don't want to dwell on Kamala Harris. I hadn't intended to spend too much time on her, but here we are. This is the nature of our moment. And so there she is. Now, I want to come back to this moment to bring this moment into the future. So we're going to start with the current transits, and I want to pull what is going on now forward into the month of August for all of us. as we move forward in August, we're going to build towards the energy of this tension between Saturn and Jupiter and Jupiter-Mars conjunct. So Jupiter-Mars conjunct is actually quite great. It's lovely transit, can be very inspiring. Again, it can also have this quality of biting off more than we can chew. So that's one of the challenges of that. But if we do work with it consciously, it can be fantastic. It can be really, really helpful. Really, I'll just pull up the actual conjunction, which is next week. It can be really, really helpful, and you can use it for something that brings you inspiration or that builds inspiration. It is in opposition to the moon, so there's something there that can be emotional or it can be challenging on the level of, in some cases, the physical or the household nature of the moon. The moon can represent the body, it can represent our home, etc. There may be new information around home and where you're living. I'm going to have to move next week. I'm moving back to Brussels next week, so it's who knows where I'll be and how it's all going to shape up as I'm going to be packing my bags and moving on with the dog, one dog only, leaving the other three behind. So anyway, all of this to say that there's a lot of buildup of pressure, and that pressure is suddenly blocked by Saturn. There's something that comes. And this is again this natal aspect that I have that I know so well, that Jupiter, Saturn, something's on, you're on a roll, there's something coming, it's a really big event, there's something very exciting developing, and then boom, something happens. Now, because we're talking about Jupiter in Gemini, we're talking about Mars also in Gemini, and we're talking about Saturn in Pisces, this can have a flavor in a general sense of the economy, finance, all kinds of exchanges. Of course, Gemini represents both conversational exchanges, dialogues, and friendships, and the relationships you have between people, but also exchanges of all kinds, monetary, material, exchanging stuff, commodities, and so on. So finances will be very, very strongly implicated because Jupiter rules this Saturn in Pisces, and then this Mercury is retrograde. Now, we already saw last week how many stock markets have started to collapse. That was forecasted and predicted financially, not even astrologically, but financially many months ago. So this situation of fragility has been ignored and neglected for a very, very long time. And it's worth noting that many countries, and most especially the US, actually fudge and fiddle with their statistics so that they're not actually true. So they'll talk about job openings and job opportunities and new jobs on the market as if those were jobs that people are actually going to be able to have. And that's not a good measure of the economy. So you'll hear often on mainstream media how there are many new job openings, and a lot of them are pure fiction. So bear this in mind. We have this whole era that we're living in is this era of confusion around what is true and what is not true. You can almost assume that things are being relayed to you for reasons of some kind of propaganda or manipulation. Therefore, you should be unplugging from all of this social and political nonsense. Don't go into that duality. Don't buy into those cult-like beliefs around politics and the economy and all this kind of stuff. So this is going to be a very likely outcome, some very deep stress coming next week, financially, collectively, in terms of communications. This can also be in terms of even the internet, because Pisces is all about our collective consciousness, our collective nature. We've got Pluto in Aquarius, which is very much that energy of the collective, how that's changing. Our way of connecting with each other through community is changing quite dramatically. And we have this Jupiter, Mars in Gemini with the retrograde Mercury, all about communication. Something is not going quite right. And then the square to Saturn is going to block it. So you come up with these new things, these new ideas, this potential, and it stops. Now, this can be a good thing because the stopping of something that may have been too early, too big, too unrealistic can actually be helpful. It calls you back to look at the details. And that's anyway, let's call it a good aspect of the Mercury. I hesitate to say good because it's neither good nor bad, but a helpful, let's say, aspect of the Mercury retrograde phase. So we can use this really consciously and pull back, scale back, and look at what needs to be changed. This dialogue between Jupiter and Saturn continues for some time. It continues right into the middle of June 2025, when that will start to happen in the cardinal signs at the early stages of Cancer and Aries. So this dialogue continues for what is that now? Almost 9 more months. So this is a big deal. This whole Jupiter Saturn square should be considered an extension of not only the eclipse cycle, but of course the months ahead. So we're adjusting here. We're adjusting our beliefs, what we have faith in, the Saturn in Pisces, and we're adjusting how we deal with that on an everyday, minute-to-minute basis. That's the Jupiter in Gemini. Mars squaring Saturn traditionally is considered to be driving with the handbrake on. So you've got the Mars that's all go, 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 firing up, and then Saturn says, slow it down. Again, can be a really dynamic and helpful quality because it's often a signature for people who do things like architecture and engineering. Can be really helpful, especially the Mars in Gemini. Really strong signature for engineering and developing solutions that are practical solutions, but that can also require some further adjustment at the sort of 24th, 25th of December point of time, when all of this is now coming back into question in the Jupiter and Saturn square. At that stage, Mars will be in just in early Leo. Or will it? No, it'll be back into the end of Cancer at that stage. But either way, it will have the opposition at that stage between Mars and Pluto. That is also part of the tension of the changes that are underway, and Mars that's going to be frustrated in its actions, or requiring a lot more pushing through to get something done that may or may not be helpful. And particularly on a collective level, unlikely to be helpful. So all of this to say that a lot of what is going on right now is much ado about nothing. It's not entirely true. I'm just using that expression, but much ado about nothing in the sense that there's going to be a lot of faffing around and fussing around and change and noise making and people, thrashing around their opinions and insulting each other and saying and doing things that they may regret later. And so this is an opportunity for us to scale it back, use that Saturn in Pisces, come back and reflect a little deeper. What can we change? What can we improve on? How can we make this more helpful? This is as I'm speaking to you, we're in a Leo lunar phase. The whole month of August is under that impression, the first impression of the new moon in Leo. And that new moon in Leo is something that brings a thrust, let's say, of one's self-expression. So we can see that that can be very creative and very helpful on an individual level, but on a collective level, there can be a lot of desire for moving forward, expressing oneself in a way that can be very bullshit, very out there. Trump will have quite a lot of this as well for the reasons of his birth chart. Again, not political. Those are reasons based on his astrology. So we're unavoidably going to hear quite a lot from our friend Donald Trump in the month ahead. So let's just have a look here before I go on to the eclipse chart. Oh, and as I go on to the eclipse chart, the reason I'm tying these things together, as many of you will already know, is that Jupiter is ruling Pisces. And so while we've got Jupiter in Gemini, it's ruling this Saturn in Pisces, and we want to also follow, therefore, what Mercury is doing, because Mercury is ruling Jupiter. Jupiter is very important because it's one of the slower outer planets that is one of the markers of time. This Jupiter squaring Saturn is considered the first quarter square, or the opening square, or the crisis of consciousness, as it's described in the more evolutionary astrology way of looking at things, that was related to the 0-degree Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that we had at the equinox of 2020, the December 21st of 2020, Jupiter and Saturn moved into Aquarius, and they're now in the phase of squaring each other. This is the first square, the opening square. Now, where do we find our dear friend Pluto? It's exactly at that point. And so, as Jupiter and Saturn and Mercury are dancing around the chart, we always want to keep track of those because Jupiter is ruled by Mercury and Saturn itself is ruling that 0 degree point where we find Pluto. It will continue to rule Pluto because Pluto in Saturn ruled Capricorn will also be answering to that Saturn, therefore answering to Jupiter, therefore answering to Mercury. And they will all need to play together. And how they play together will tell us the quality of the moments that we're moving through. The other thing to keep in mind is that Pluto has been at that 0 degree point to a large extent in the early part of 2023. So what we could call spring from March through June of 2023 when it first ingressed Aquarius. And if you want to know more about that, I did a very extensive, several videos, but very extensive look at Pluto moving into Aquarius and what that represents. I will repost, I'm going to repost the introduction to that because there's a lot of fear and worry around these times. And I want people to understand how empowering these transits can be if we use them on a personal level to grow from the inside out, not feel like things are happening to us, but rather to grow with these energies. So I'm going to edit out and reassign that video, just the introduction to that, because I think a lot of people skip introductions as well. Probably people skipping this as well, but there we are. And so that Pluto moving into Aquarius is happening at the beginning of spring, let's say 2023. It happened again in January 2024. And now we're getting it, and let's say January, February, and now we're getting it again at this slowing down moment in the end of August or throughout all of August, even a part of July. Well, Pluto is moving back into Capricorn. All of this, all of these moments, and then again in December and let's say, end of November, December, and January 2025, Pluto is triggering that point of the great conjunction between Jupiter and Saturn, which are playing such a heavy role this year and next year. And the reason that all of that continues to matter is because the nodes, which are also very important markers of change, the Great Conjunction is a timing technique, an ancient timing technique that marked the change of bigger cycles, our social cycles, the bigger cycles in life. The nodal axis is also one of those markers of change. And the nodal axis shifts every 18 months. And that nodal axis will shift mid-January 2025 into the Virgo and Pisces axis, with the North Node going into Pisces. Before it does that, and just to keep you as a reminder, Jupiter is going to rule the North Node when it's in Pisces. It's going to start ruling that from Gemini, and Mercury is ruling the South Node throughout the time that it's in Virgo. So it continues to hold this connection there between the Jupiter and Mercury energy, as well as the Saturn and Pluto energy, the Saturn in Pisces ruled by Jupiter, and then the Saturn ruling Pluto. All of them are in this constant engagement for a very, very long time to come. And so those patterns of association and their dignities, keep in mind their dignities, are very important in the next few months. So let's start. Before we go a little deeper into this, I want to start with the lunar eclipse that we're moving into because of this quality of the relationship between Jupiter and Saturn. And again, if you want to know more about Jupiter and Gemini, I've already done a video on that. I did a very in-depth video about, describing the Jupiter and Gemini qualities sign by sign, and same thing with Saturn in Pisces. So I don't want to keep relaying all the same information. Please go back and have a look at those videos. The Saturn in Pisces one I did, I think at the end of 2022, and you'll find it sign by sign. You'll find it on my channel. The Jupiter and Gemini one would have been earlier this year. So have a look for that if you want to know more, because otherwise this video will go on for days. So I feel it's already getting quite long, and especially because we're not even into the sign by sign yet. So this is the lunar eclipse. It's a first look. I will absolutely come back and have a look at this lunar eclipse chart because it's going to set us up for a long time, and it's a furthering of this conversation of the Jupiter-Saturn square, and it's a furthering of the conversation of August as August sets us up to go into the months ahead. August is quite an interesting dynamic. It's going to be almost like a fractal of the months ahead, in a way that I think we can use consciously if we keep that awareness of what we're trying to create or recreate or do in our own lives, let's say. So let me just quickly break down the eclipse chart. Remember, I will go more in depth about this. I will go also sign by sign and show you how this shows up in your chart. Now, I want you to notice that this is going to be one of those unusual out of sign eclipses. It's the first eclipse. It's a lunar eclipse because the moon is in Pisces. That's what is in the range of degrees, so within 11 degrees of the North Node. So up to 15 to 18 degrees, depends on who you ask. Within a conjunction of 15 to 18 degrees, you get an eclipse. Usually I give it 15 degrees because that would be noticeable. Beyond 15, it starts to be difficult to detect with the naked eye. But nonetheless, it's within the range, 11 degrees of conjunction with the North Node, as the moon is at 25 degrees of Pisces. And of course, the sun in opposition, making the full moon, is at 25 of Virgo. Again, remember, we're talking about a Jupiter-ruled sign, Pisces, and a Mercury-ruled sign, Virgo. Mercury at this point will now be in opposition to the Saturn that we're talking about so much at this time. And the Mercury in opposition to Saturn is also in its very, very powerful position of its domicile as well as its exaltation sign in Virgo. Mercury loves Virgo. And so we even have a very strong Venus, which is currently ruling at the time of that eclipse, the South Node from her happy place, which is in Libra. And we see that Jupiter, remember, ruled by that Mercury, now very, very strong, very fast moving because it's coming out of its retrograde motion. It has already met up with the sun earlier in the cycle, sort of 3-4 weeks before this eclipse happened. They had their conjunction. And Mercury is now moving really, really fast. And ruling now this Jupiter, which is moving very slow, as it's slowly over the next couple of weeks going to be stationing retrograde at 21 degrees of Gemini at the beginning of October. So the degree point, we look here at 20 degrees, 35 minutes of Gemini, is actually the midpoint between the moon and Saturn. So this pulls the moon and Saturn very tightly together. This is a really interesting aspect to this eclipse because it again ties this whole Jupiter and Saturn square in a very tight relationship to this eclipse. And so that's why I'm pulling this energy from August forward into September, because the story has already begun in August. The story of this eclipse has already begun. I hope you're watching this in early August. As we look at all of these transits, you can start to see things on the way, coming forward down the pipeline. And so we're seeing a lot of things already taking shape that you will be able to see taking effect coming through the eclipse time of 18th of September. Now, 2 weeks later, on the 2nd of October, Jupiter is going to be stationing retrograde at the next eclipse, which will be the very final eclipse, which is at the new moon stage in Libra. So at the 11 degrees of Libra, I think it is. I will talk about all of these things going forward. But the other thing to keep in mind, aside from that square, which is still active, by the way, so Jupiter is exactly squaring the midpoint between the sun and the moon rather, and Saturn, but it is also squaring the moon and squaring Saturn. So we now get this emphasis on this expansion and this vision and this thing that says, yes, 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 but Saturn is still there, and Saturn is rethinking, and Saturn is going backwards. It's saying, I'm not so sure about all these things. I'm not so sure we have all the details right. I'm not so sure that everything is the way we want it. Let's check in with Mercury. What do you think? So we find our leadership in this case with Mercury. And Mercury is going to be crucial because that is about clear thinking and finding out what it is that we need to express, how we need to express it, what it is that needs to be perhaps communicated in some way. Are we thinking clearly? This will be the question to ask of Mercury at this time. And don't, on an individual level, don't hesitate to slow your roll and slow things down if you find that things are not quite what they seemed to be. We also have a Venus, which is in strong opposition to Chiron at this time. Chiron having gone to 23 degrees and retrograding now back. Venus and Chiron are in strong opposition. And it just so happens that at the time of this Pisces lunar eclipse, which is the 18th of September, we have Chiron on the midheaven for this particular eclipse time. I put the placement in Greenwich, which is basically London, modern day London. Used to be outside of London, but it's currently modern day London. And that Greenwich Mean Time is now called Universal Time. Anyway, so this is where the midheaven is at the point of this eclipse with Chiron on the midheaven, retrograding in Aries in opposition to a very strong Venus. So now we have to start to question our way of showing up. And again, I keep going too deep into this reading. I didn't want to get into all that, but heads up, that's what we're going to be looking at. I'll go deeper in another video. Otherwise, again, I will never get anything done. And I've got a bunch of sighing dogs outside my door. I've taken refuge in the dining room to get away from the dogs. So here we are with another very interesting feature of this, which is that Mars, of course, has just entered into Cancer. And Cancer is a water sign, so that will be a trine to the Saturn, as well as to this eclipse and to the Neptune that is now retrograding through the eclipse in terms of the eclipse energy. The Neptune, where it is at the Pisces lunar eclipse, is also where it will be in January, the end of January, beginning of February, when the North Node meets up. And that's where Venus will be. We will have Venus, Neptune, and the North Node conjoining. I think it's on the 1st or 2nd of February. At this point, where Neptune is already retrograding, by that time it will be direct. So we're getting a lot of things that are pulling in the future, pulling in the past, pulling in big events of change around this September 18th eclipse energy. And then that Mars, which is not in terribly strong dignity, is ruled by that moon in Pisces, which doesn't have any particular dignity or otherwise, which is squaring its ruler, Jupiter, which is opposite the ruler of the Jupiter, broadly, opposite, of course, the Sun, which is ruled by that Mercury ruling Jupiter. And that Mars is not in very good dignity because Mars doesn't like to be ruled by emotions, which is the moon. It doesn't like to be changeable, which is the moon. It likes consistency. One good part about the Mars is that it's in a cardinal energy. Mars in Cancer is cardinal, so it will act quickly, but it will act based on emotion rather than on some considered, let's say, thoughtful action. Now, one of the good things about that is that, again, the Jupiter, which is ruling the moon, is ruled by a very thoughtful Mercury. So this may not be as bad as we think. So we'll see. But nonetheless, so Jupiter is squaring the moon, squaring Saturn still, because remember that square lasts for most of this period of time up until early next year. And then Mars itself is squaring the nodal axis. Very tight. It's within just over a degree of a square of the North Node, which it rules. So we've got a Chiron retrograding on the midheaven and ruled by that Mars, and the Mars ruling the North Node. Now, this is, again, I don't want to go too deep into the significance of it, but just to say that there will be a choice and there will be a need for choosing based on something that has an emotional impact. This is very strongly highlighting the American Sibley chart, the United States Sibley chart of the 4th of July, 1776. And so that chart has Jupiter currently passing through its 7th house, which is where the U.S. Mars is. The U.S. ascendant, I think it's 12 degrees of Sagittarius, and that is also being it will be squared by the Saturn. It will be the ascendant descendant axis, and the Mars in the US Sibley chart will be squared by Saturn as it's going back. It already has been. As it's going back, it will station in a square to that. And that will be a few weeks away from the lunar eclipse. It'll be at the end of October. So basically, watch this space. You're going to be already engaging in whatever August is bringing for you, whatever August is bringing for all of us. We're engaging in something that requires a lot of thoughtfulness, and we need to be aware consciously that a lot of our idealizations, fantasies, the Jupiterian desire for expansion and optimism that is so strong in Gemini, big ideas, big plans, they will not necessarily be able to come to fruition. And we can be on, let's say, emotionally triggered or stimulated to do things on impulse or do things in a way that may lead us down the wrong path. There's the North Node in Aries that Mars is ruling from this very emotional place that may have us thinking in ways that are unconstructive or coming from a place of, you could even call it nationalistic defensiveness, because in a general sense, Cancer, which is, by the way, where the USA chart has its stellium, Cancer is very much about home and family and homeland. And so we're going to see a lot of clashes and a lot of tension and a lot of bombast around issues of nationalistic and perhaps even personal, emotional substance or lack of substance. I think hopefully we can get to that Mercury and find more substance. Right, so here we are. I'm pulling August into this Pisces lunar eclipse because I want you to see how much this is actually already in play. At this stage also, we have now a retrograde Uranus, and that Uranus has only reached that 27-degree point in 2024. It doesn't get any further than that. It goes back to 23 degrees, and then it goes right through to Gemini next year. In the meantime, as Pluto is backing into Capricorn to get to 29.5 degrees, it's creating a relatively strong trine to Uranus. So it's all systems go, lots of change that happens to also build with the Sun moving into a grand Earth trine with Uranus and Pluto just in a couple of days after the lunar eclipse, which has to be considered as part of the lunar eclipse, which includes the ongoing Neptune sextile with Pluto and the Neptune sextile with Uranus. Things are not what they seem. Things are going to be changing in dramatic ways. I invite you to let go of the paradigm of the old right-left paradigm, these notions of Democrat, Republican, conservative, Labor, whatever it is, whatever your political notions, they are irrelevant now. They have been already for some time. Please let them go. Bring yourself peace and bring peace into the world by letting this go. You have no saviors outside of yourself. Christ the Savior is consciousness. Christ as the Savior is Pisces. Pisces is about merging with the absolute, merging with the awe. Christ is the awareness or consciousness that we are, the truth of ourselves. When we consider the self, the unchanging self that we identify with throughout our lifetime, while we're in diapers, while we're growing up with pimply faces through adolescence, while we're getting married, while we're getting divorced, while we're having grandchildren, it's all the same self we're identifying with as the outer conditions are changing constantly. That's the Christ consciousness. And that is the Savior. There's no person out there that is the Savior. There was for sure an historical Yeshua, the historical, what we call Jesus in the English language, was an individual who was a prophet trying to point these things out to us. Let thine eye be single. Let thine eye be single. The temple is here. The temple is not out there. These are the messages. These are not a religious admonition. These are not religious messages. These are the deeper messages of truth. This is where we will find salvation. This is your Savior. So go there, go as often as you can to that place of knowing, where there is no duality, there is no politicking, there is no need to argue with one another. So I invite you to really think that way. And by the way, the ascendant at this eclipse, some of you will have already noticed, is where we had the new moon. Just to add to that August quality, the new moon was at 12 degrees of Leo on the 4th and 5th of August. And that is where we find the ascendant to this eclipse chart. So it's pulling all of August into the eclipse. And I want you to see that everything is a continuum. And how you handle that is how you handle your own inner intellect and mental process, but also emotional process. The moon at a North Node eclipse can be very emotional, especially with the Pisces moon, where we pull in potentially action or feelings or a sense of victimization. Martyring, that Pisces and Virgo axis is all about the victim martyr energy as well as the savior energy. Again, you are your own salvation, so don't look for it outside of yourself. Right, there we are. I'm going to back away now from the lunar eclipse and I'm going to go sign by sign. How will I do this? I need to clean up my chart a little bit because otherwise it gets a little confusing. So let me just pull this right back. And I'm going to just take a lunation chart, skim it right back. Do we need all this stuff? I'm going to just take a couple of other things off here before, just to make things a little bit clearer. So I don't have to keep going over everything all the time, because I want to focus really on the Jupiter and Saturn square. So can I pull everything away? I'll just keep it and we'll just work around it. All right, let's try and stay focused, Susan, stay focused. We're going to just jump now into the Jupiter-Saturn square. And so I'm going to go hour by hour and change the, so forget the degree points. We don't mind. We can include the Mars, but I'm really, really focused on the Jupiter-Saturn, okay, at this time. Alrighty, so we're going to start with Aries. Hello, Aries. There we go. We'll start with Aries and we're going to work our way around. I'm just going to give you a really, hopefully short. The grumpy dogs are outside the door waiting for me, so I'm going to try and be really short. Now, for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising sign. And you will find in the description below this video why there's a difference between sun, moon, and rising, what that represents. Always click on the more thing in the description box below the video. There's loads of information, including how to find me, how to find my website, how to book a session with me if you're interested, and also even, hey, how to support me if you'd like to support my channel, because as you have heard earlier, I don't monetize my channel. I prefer to make my income through your graceful contributions or through your appointments with me. So there we are. So for Aries, Sun, Moon, and Rising sign, we're having this in your 12th house. So Saturn is moving through your 12th house. Again, you can go back to the Saturn video, find out more about that. Well, Jupiter is in your 3rd house. Now, Jupiter is closely associated with your ruler Mars at the 1st square in August. That initial square will be on the 19th of August. And that 19th of August is the perfection of the square, but it's also already building around the 16th of August as Jupiter Mars meets up in square with Saturn. So there's a tension here between your either immediate surroundings, the people around you, the people who know your name, let's say, the day-to-day stuff of life, and maybe what is coming through your unconscious or coming through habits or coming through ways of being that are coming into your awareness. Now, the 12th house is the house of hidden enemies. It's the house of things that we're not aware of. That can also be your unconscious processes. And so at this time, we're also looking at something that might be needing your attention or might be brought to your attention through conversations or through discussions, through something that is coming through your understanding or awareness or connections with other people. You're pulling the 12th house into your 3rd house. That also involves the 9th house because Jupiter rules both the 12th and the 9th. And so there's something that you're bringing into your local environment or bringing into your everyday consciousness that is part of what you need to restructure or change in your 12th house environment. This could also involve travel, long distance travel, or working online. Now we've got Pluto in your 11th house that can also pull in the internet and working online with people, but the internet is also there in the third house, connecting with people through education, teaching, or learning. As it's Jupiter in the third, it might be more likely you, if you're doing teaching or even coaching, you could call that coaching. Jupiter rules the ninth house of advisors, for example. And so there's something here that is coming through your everyday life much more obviously. This can also involve a sibling. Gemini in the third house, especially where Mars is, could be brothers, elder brothers particularly. And as Pluto is going through the 11th is the house of elder brothers too. So there may be something there that involves an elder sibling, something that you might be getting from an elder sibling, for example. That Saturn in the 12th house is a long standing transit that has started in March 2023. It goes right through till February 2026. So this Jupiter is just highlighting that. It's just pulling that into your consciousness, pulling it into your awareness. So whatever's coming up in tension at this time, it's something that Saturn has said, I don't feel ready for this, or the circumstances around me are not ready for whatever this period of growth or desire or expansion is trying to call in. You'll understand that better from October when Jupiter starts itself going retrograde. As through October, most of November, Jupiter and Saturn will both be retrograding. You can revise all of these plans and ideas and the things that you might need to change in your day-to-day life or in your world around you, your neighborhood even. And then that will call in this bigger restructuring, let's say, towards 2025, when the North Node then moves into your 12th house. And Jupiter and Saturn will then pull the energy forward as they both move direct. Jupiter will move direct by the end of 2024, Saturn already by mid-November. So you'll start to get answers only, I think, really in 2025. If you can, try to be flexible and work with whatever is going on in these domains of your life so that you can actually become more and more aware of whatever the obstacle is. This is, by the way, with Saturn in the 12th, a really good dynamic for letting go of unhelpful habits. Now, just at the time that we're speaking here, we still have Mercury and Venus in your sixth. Venus is the exaltation ruler of your 12th of Pisces. And of course, Jupiter rules Pisces, and Mercury, of course, rules your sixth house. So this can have something to do with health. If this does have something to do with health, it may be about needing to slow down because this is about retrograding energy, Mercury retrograding. Yeah, so this retrograde energy. Yeah, just carry on and work in such a way that you are able to plan your way forward. Yeah, so I'm going to leave it at that. I want you to go back to the Jupiter in Gemini video that I did, go back to the Saturn in Pisces video that I did, even go back if you need to the Pluto in Aquarius videos that I've done, all of which will give you background and extra information. And if you haven't listened to the introduction, the very long introduction, please do, because it also gives you enormous background to all of these qualities, these energies, okay? Right, so make the best of that and good luck with that. And we're just going to move things forward now. Okay, I'm going to go forward to the actual. Wait, I want to just change this chart here. I'm going to change to the Mars conjunct Jupiter chart, and we use that one instead of the ongoing chart. So let me just back up to our Taurus people. Oh, hang on, sorry. Right, so Taurus, we're going to get to you in a minute. There we are, Taurus. Right, so Taurus, Sun, Moon, and Rising. This is happening in your money house, which is your natural house. So both Jupiter and Mars are in a conjunction and in a square to Saturn, but we're focusing especially on the Jupiter and Saturn square. And that squaring energy is pulling tension into both of your money houses. Jupiter rules your 11th house of gains. It rules your 8th house of other people's money, and it's in your house of your own money and your resources and the things that support you, which also include your family, by the way. This may also involve children because we've got a Mercury ruled 5th house where we find Mercury retrograding at this time, where we also find Venus, your ruler. So there seems to be something that requires some reference, some new understanding of your stuff, your money, your resources, your income, your investments. And with Saturn in the 11th house, it could be that outer, what you might call them, outer events, stock market events, for example, are requiring you to make adjustments in your expectations or have to slow something down so that you are being more realistic or perhaps even deciding to be more bullish because actually Taurus can be a bit conservative because Mercury rules your 5th house. Virgo is a bit cautious, and that's one of the reasons why Taurus is known for not being particularly sort of the gambly type. You prefer to hold on to what you have because Mercury ruled Virgo is in your 5th house of taking risks, extending yourself. So with the moon, which is also ruled by Jupiter in your 8th house, there might be some in a T-square there with Saturn in the 11th. There might be some development that you're realizing around shared resources, and it can be collectively shared, as in the stock market, or shared as in marital resources or family resources. This is coming to your attention around the middle of August. So it can also be that this is about actual restructuring in terms of the family and home, because we do also have the sun in the 4th at the time of the 1st square. Now, this continues many, many months. Remember, this is the overall flavor of this, but I'm just giving you the flavor especially strongly in August. We'll keep coming back and referencing these squares because they will reappear again in December and again next June. And those squares will keep answering the questions that are coming up for you right now. This may also have something to do with a potential around income that suddenly seems thwarted or suddenly seems like you might need to go through a revision because we've got Pluto moving into your career house for a long, long time. Again, look at the Pluto in Aquarius video for more details on that. But because Pluto is there, we know your attention is pulled into your social status or your career, your vocation, how other people see you, your public image. And that is what is ruled by this Saturn in the 11th house of your future. Something about your future is either being blocked or questioned, or something about gains is being blocked or questioned at this time. So the optimism or the expectation around money or around where you might get support is being blocked at this time. And it can be because of somebody that is across the table from you in terms of your money management or in terms of your partnerships that bring you results. Now, the moon is exalted in Taurus, so it's the exaltation ruler for Taurus, for you. Sun, moon, or rising in Taurus. And especially if you have a Taurus moon, you have an exalted moon. And so the moon is squaring Saturn and opposing this Jupiter Mars at this time. It's also, it has just gone through a square to your ruler, Venus, and that can show that there is some tension or an overreaching. A moon in Sagittarius can be extremely impulsive, not necessarily stable, because again, we're looking at a mutable moon in a fire sign, and it's a Jupiter-ruled moon that is coming from a place of less dignity than usual with that Jupiter there in detriment. So yeah, be careful about, I mean, I probably don't need to tell you as a Taurus, be careful about investments, be careful about the future vision that you have for yourself. Don't be overly frustrated at this time if your plans haven't worked out. Be careful around how you put your money forward, where you put your money, how you're going to deal with that, and try to be as realistic as you can in terms of your vision for what is there for support. Now, the other aspect of this is where you might be finding you yourself are over giving support to others, and you're realizing, hang on a minute, that I'm not getting anything back, or I'm only realizing now that I need to do that. Now, that's part of the nodal axis here with the South Node in your sixth house. It's about changing how you relate to other people, changing how you relate to your sense of everyday obligations. And that's ruled by Venus, which is going to come up to meet that in the weeks ahead. So, right. I think that's without seeing your natal chart, I wouldn't know exactly how this is going to manifest for you, Taurus, but I do think that you want to pay a lot of attention to your finances. This, of course, in a general sense, of course, can include your values, what your values are. And that also can include your children because Mercury represents children, Jupiter represents parenting. Mercury is ruling your fifth house and in your fifth house with your ruler, Venus. So maybe a lot of this money stuff or the vision that you had for your future is also perhaps affected by or affecting your children. Right. I'm going to leave it at that, Taurus. Good luck with whatever is coming up for you. This is, remember, for several months. It's not just now in August, but it's the first kickoff, let's say, is it here in August. Gemini. And this is for sun, moon, or rising. In Gemini, you're obviously very, very focused on your own personal growth and how you can develop in the world around you because you've got Jupiter in your sign. It's your first house of self, if it is your ascendant sign, but anyway, very important for the sun and the moon in Gemini, especially sun regarding your career and your sense of purpose. The moon, of course, would be your emotional nature or your relationship to your family, home, mother, etc. This is a big deal for Gemini. It's there for 1 year and it's ruling, Jupiter is ruling your 10th house of your social status, your reputation, your career, your vocation. That's where we find this Saturn. So that means that there's something going on here that requires you to take on more responsibility. And perhaps there was a real feeling of enthusiasm and opportunity and lots going on, especially with that Mars going through your first house. I can do this. I want this. The North Node ruled by that Mars in your 11th house. I'm going in this direction. This is the thing that's going to happen. And then Saturn is slowing you down. And Saturn is saying, wait, either it's an authority figure or it's someone who may come through wise counsel because Saturn rules your ninth house, your eighth house of advisors, counselors, wisdom, your philosophy of life. So maybe there's something that's coming in saying, hang on just a minute. I'm not so sure this is the right way to go about it, or this is maybe not going to work out because you maybe need to go back and sharpen your tools. That would be the Jupiter Mars. Sharpen your tools and see then how you can proceed to achieve the thing that you want. Because it's not a no. The squares require adjustment. So Saturn squaring Jupiter is not a no to Jupiter. It's a saying, wait a minute, have you thought about this? Jupiter in Gemini thinks about everything all the time, especially when Mars is there at the same time. And so we want to rethink this. Now remember that Mercury, your chart ruler, your ascendant ruler, very important for you, is in retrograde. It's in a very strong dignity, very strong Mercury at this time. It's going to spend quite a lot of time in between Virgo in your fourth house and Leo in your third house of communication. So you will be having most of the rest of August, right up until 28th or 29th of August, to reflect and think about whatever it is that Saturn seems to be asking you to slow down or to take more seriously or to find the courage, let's say, to show up in this perhaps new way that you may not feel entirely up for. We saw this, by the way, in Kamala Harris's chart. If you didn't listen to the introduction, you might like to go back and see. Of course, your chart will be different unless you're born same time and place as Kamala Harris, but your chart will be similar in the sense that it's a Gemini rising. So you can have a look at what was said there. So a lot of this is an opportunity for you to quieten down not to say you should discard your plans and your intentions, but just to recognize that you have to justify your plans and intentions to the world outside. That's Saturn in the 10th. Whether it's a public authority or a person, you have to justify what it is that you plan to do to other people. And I don't see this as a bad thing. I think this is something that is bringing your awareness into where you may have run over things a little too quickly, or you may have been a little too expansive too soon. So these squares, the Gemini and Saturn square, can really bring you some great benefit, even if at the same time it can bring you some doubt. So the Saturn and the Jupiter squaring the Saturn rather, is something that can have us doubt at times. It's like, yes, yes, yes. Oh, I don't know. Is that the right thing? Or no, it's all going wrong. And then it's like, no, it's not. It's fine. And so this is representing your moment in time in a nutshell. And especially, again, if you're like me, born in early 66, you have this exact formation in your chart. You have a Jupiter in Gemini, you have the Saturn in Pisces, and this will be for a Gemini ascendant, very, very personal, but your personal is coming through the outer worldly experience of your life, or the life that you have in terms of your authority figures and in terms of your sense of purpose in the world. So I would want to see your natal chart before I get too much into the details here, but this is basically it. This is an opportunity for you to step back and say, it's not a no, this is a yes and. What do I need to do to make this better, to be able to withstand, to be able to come to that place of authority, 10th house, mastery over the thing that I want to bring out into the world, or to my reputation in general. Mercury is helping with this at this time. Your ruler, Mercury, is helping you as it's retrograding. So use August as a moment of reflection and retweaking, especially with Mars there, reconfiguring the details, the nuts and bolts of what's going on. And then you'll find that as things start to move forward, it becomes more, you'll have that confidence, you'll have the clarity, but it may not be really manifesting until 2025. So we just have to roll with these collectively as we go through ups and downs. Don't take it personally. This is about personal growth. You're here for growth this year. It's about getting it right. So even if you have to do it twice, that's also a very Gemini thing. You might have to do it twice, and that would be absolutely in line with your Gemini nature. So it wouldn't be the last time, right? Or the first time for sure. All right, Gemini, good luck with all that. I will see you in the next video. So Cancer, this is happening in your 9th and 12th houses. So Saturn is in your 9th house for a very long time, from March of 2023 all the way through till February 2026. And Jupiter is in your 12th from June 24 till June 25, basically, or May 24 till June 25. So you are, let's say, preparing behind the scenes. Some of your ways of showing up in the world, there's an enormous amount of reflection or thinking around what you believe, what is important, how you might even structure your sense of whether that be a philosophical or a political belief or a spiritual one, especially because of that 12th and 9th house connection, as Jupiter is ruling the 9th from the 12th. Saturn is retrograding through the 9th. So there was an idea, or there was a sense of, I'm going in this direction. It's a new direction. Now it's retrograding. And the Saturn retrograding through the 9th is showing that there is actually something that needs to be defended about what you believe. It has to stand up to the test, let's say. Jupiter in Gemini squaring Saturn in Pisces, especially there for Cancers, that 9th house, 12th house energy, it's almost like saying what I believe needs evidence. There's a doubt in what I believe. Now, this can be an ongoing tension for the rest of 2024 and even into 2025, the first half of 2025, as that square is broadly in operation. And certainly sign-based square in operation there. if not exactly by degree. But let's say now and then again, so August and then again at Christmas time, middle of August is going to be a period of, okay, this is what needs to stop and recharge or reflect or redo around what I believe, how I want to go forward. Now, this can also involve areas of travel because both the ninth and the 12th are about traveling. And so Jupiter very strongly ruling that ninth house with that mercurial energy of travel. Mercury is now retrograde. It goes between your third house of travel and the second house of money and values and so on. So there might be something that is coming between issues of cost or issues of delays because Mercury is retrograde that requires some kind of adjustment. Again, in terms of your plans, where do I want to go? How do I want to get there? There's something here that might be affecting your vision for travel or how you want to experience work, even in foreign lands. It can be about foreign lands as well, especially around work at this moment because your ruler, the moon, is in your sixth house of your work. It's also, of course, associated with your daily health habits. The moon represents the body, and it's also your everyday work, the stuff of your work. And so that can also be part of this story. How is your current situation affecting your health? Um, so you're preparing for Mars to move into your first house. That's another part of this story for you. So unconsciously, Mars going through the 12th house can have you feeling quite aggravated, and that depends on your nature, depends on your natal chart. It's not true for everyone. Mars in the 12th is also very good at doing research, just like with Jupiter. This is a good time to be researching. I'm personally deliberately using this time with the Mercury retrograde ruling the 12th, where we find the Jupiter and Mars. I have a Cancer moon and rising, and the Saturn Neptune up in the ninth. I'm using this time to really work on my book, revising, rewriting. Um, I'm trying to actually draw, create the layout, draw some charts, and put some evidence of certain aspects and things in the book. So you can do the same, even if you're not writing a book. This might be a project where you're learning something. So this is an incredibly good, very rich time to be working on whatever you're learning. So Venus is in the third house, although she's not in strong dignity, also ruled by that Mercury retrograde. She's not in happy place in Mercury ruled Virgo, but she rules your ninth house by exaltation, and so she can be very helpful. And that's also ruling your 11th house of your vision, and your sense of the future going forward. So that can be very helpful as Venus is in this very chatty place, very social connections in terms of your everyday exchanges at this time. And Venus rules your fourth house, where we find the South Node. So again, connections with family, connections with where you live, connections with relationships of all kinds on an intimate, not like the psychologically intimate or usually more sort of at homey kind of intimate, like behind closed doors kind of intimate. That's all there in all of this configuration as well through August. But the larger square there between Jupiter and Saturn remains, remember, all the way through until spring, June of 2025. And I will definitely keep reminding you of all of that. But this tension between what do I believe? How do I defend my beliefs? Is it founded in something? Do I doubt everything? Is there skepticism? Or do I believe too much that without any evidence? And then this inner tension can still be there. That is also where you might find yourself biting off more than you can chew and thinking, oh, this will be fine. It'll work out fine. And then finding that Saturn in the ninth says, this isn't going to work out the way you wanted, or there can be a feeling of doubt that comes in. Now, again, this will depend on your natal chart in so many ways. Listen to the introduction too, because overall we're going through this in a very much more general way. So make the best of all of this. I hope it goes well for you either way, Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Rising. See you in the next video. Righty-ho. So for Leo, we now have this happening in your 11th house where we find Jupiter and Mars in square to Saturn. And that square between Jupiter and Saturn remains for quite some time. So think of this in terms of August, but especially for the next few months, it's setting up a big picture. Listen to the introduction to hear more of that. So this is especially for Leo rising, sun, and moon. If it is your rising sign, you'll feel this much more literally. If it's your sun, of course, it's going to be very personal to you. So that's about your career, perhaps. But either way, it's going to apply. Um, and so the Jupiter is in your 11th house, expanding your connections with people, expanding your sense of the future, expanding ideas. Mars in the 11th makes that a little tricky because either there can be too much enthusiasm or too much involvement that can also be a bit controlling. Here's a news flash for Leo, is that you have an energy that can be a bit controlling. Now, that's a fixed sign thing. And that controlling nature is because you have a sense that you know already what is right and what is wrong. And this is where Mercury retrograde going back into Leo may have you need to question some of that. Mercury retrograding into your sign is ruling that Jupiter um, and Mars in your 11th house. The square to Saturn there is that the eighth house, where Saturn has been for quite some time, feels like you're not getting a lot of support from other people. And so that Mars can have you, there may be some friction there. So Jupiter in the 11th can be fantastic because you can actually get some genuine support from friends, especially with Jupiter and Gemini in the 11th. There can be genuine support from friends, but it can also be that there's, again, your sense of how it needs to take shape may cause friction because that Mars there can cause some friction in the 11th house. It's not necessarily bad. It can also be very good in terms of income, how you earn your income. So Venus is in your second house of earned income and resources and finances and so on. So she's helping you, where Saturn in the eighth house has maybe had you feeling like things have not really been there for you. People have not been there, resources have not been there. You're needing more help, but you're going to be your resource at this time. So whenever Saturn is going through the eighth house, we're having to learn how to stand on our own 2 feet. There's some distance between us and somebody else's support that seems to be delayed or not forthcoming for whatever reason. Neptune being there also may have had you engaging in some financial or even romantic relationships that actually have not been what you thought they would be. And this is part of that story. I've left Neptune a little bit off to the margins because I'll talk more about Neptune when I get to talk more about the eclipses. But that is for you part of your financial story or intimate story, especially as Pluto is moving into your seventh, and that's causing some disruption in relationships overall. So this squaring from your vision for your future, from your friends, from earned income or your income in general, is being slowed down by other people's actions or by the need to come into yourself and understand your own maybe psychological nature, what's going on psychologically for you, how you might need to think about things or communicate things, especially now that Mercury is moving retrograde in your house of self. Right. So, yeah, so that Saturn in the eighth is an opportunity for being more confident. It feels difficult when you're going through it. It can, depends on your natal chart, but it can feel very difficult going through it. You might feel actually quite isolated in terms of not feeling support from other people, although you do actually have the help of Jupiter, though it's not in great dignity. So we know that the help is not necessarily what you may have hoped that it would be, but it's still help. It's still Jupiter at the end of the day, and you have Venus. And it's still Venus in your second house of money, even though she's not a happy camper either. The truth of the Leo, especially ascendant, is that you're here to learn how to be your own leader, how to be here on your own terms. That doesn't mean you're here to boss everybody around. It means that you're here to be expressing yourself in your own way. So this will be certainly an occasion for you to do that. to really see that that's possible, and to see where you may have optimistically or over optimistically relied on friends or other people or a dream or a vision for the future that turns out not to be entirely reliable. And this could be the theme for you over, let's say, the next 8 to 9 months. And it'll depend again on your natal chart, so how that all pans out. But that's as a general overview, that's how I see things for you, Leo. All right, make the best of it. Good luck. It's not bad at all. It's really, really nourishing. It's very, very strong for your personal growth, as you're anyway changing quite a lot in terms of how you show up in the world with Uranus moving through your 10th house. And Uranus will be gone by next summer and fully gone by the year after, 2026. So you'll be changing a lot of things in your friends group. So this might be just a kind of an indication of how things need to change, with both Pluto going through your 7th and this tension between Saturn in your 8th and Jupiter Mars in your 11th house of friendships. Alrighty, Leo, good luck with that. I'll see you in the next video. So, yeah, here we have Virgo rising. So you've had to contend with Saturn in your 7th house for quite some time. This is not unfamiliar territory for you, Virgo rising. You're in the middle of a retrograde. So your ruler, when it's retrograde, is all about revising things from the past. And it might even be a person that comes back from the past, a relationship that comes back from the past. Saturn is there in retrograde in your 7th house, squaring Jupiter, Mars in your 10th house. There's something here that is about how you want to expand and grow in your social status, in your career, in your sense of ambition and drive, your reputation, where Saturn is maybe something that can be held back by another person, or that is, again, like I said, maybe somebody coming from another time in your life, another relationship, an old relationship, or another way of being in relationship that is now has changed. The dynamic has changed. Either that means that the relationship is moving on, or it means that an old relationship is coming back, or an old friendship is becoming a lover, or an old friend is now becoming a business partner, or an associate or something like that. Anyway, your day-to-day life is changing dramatically because of this. These are angular houses, very important. You've got Venus. First, you did have Mercury beginning its retrograde at the beginning, 4th, 5th of August in your sign, in your first house. It will come back there and spend quite a lot of time through September in your first house. So you will be having a lot of a sense of self, a lot of sense of what to do, how to make choices, how to go forward, because your ruler in your first house will bring you strong dignity. So a lot of this will be how you choose to move forward, how you choose to go through and navigate your career or personal relationships. At the same time, we also have the moon in your 4th house. So this might have something to do with how you're setting up, where you live, how you live. This might be based on a work relationship or based on a decision around career or your social status of some kind, and that is somehow needing an adjustment. Remember, squares require adjustment. This is like the T-square that we saw there at the 14th of August conjunction exact between Jupiter and Mars, then creating a T-square with the moon in opposition, and Saturn now building to another square with Venus. So there's a lot going on in your house and home, in your emotional life, in your whatever you feel you need for security, that is reflecting relationships, and the relationships themselves require an adjustment. And that's the way it goes. So for Virgos in general, often there can be, again, depends on the natal chart, but there can be a sense of neediness around relationships, or there can be a sense of overgiving in relationships. And with Saturn there, it's good to do the housekeeping. Use this time from March 2023 till February 2026. Do the housekeeping around relationships. You might find yourself disappointed in some relationships or business partnerships. So don't, especially because Jupiter is ruling your 7th from the 10th house. So your business partners are also part of this story, or your business ambitions or your social ambitions, part of this story, career ambitions. But use this time deliberately and wisely, meaning the 2.5 years that Saturn will be there in your seventh, to select, the people who really are there for you, and to work with the people who are on your team, and let go of the rest. There's a great expression which I absolutely love, which is to separate the needy from the greedy. And Virgos need to learn this lesson. It's a life lesson for Virgo in terms of your relationship energy. Especially with Neptune there for a very long time. Now it's been like 13 years that Neptune has been in your seventh house. There may have been a lot of disillusionment, disappointment, over idealizing in relationships. And Saturn going through there is like, this is the real deal. This is the reality of the situation. So welcome that opportunity, and know that also Saturn in the seventh house doesn't mean you can't have a relationship, especially when Jupiter is in the 10th ruling that. It can bring you a really solid relationship. You want to have Saturn somehow involved in your relationships, otherwise they're not good. Saturn gives longevity, it brings gravitas, it brings some kind of commitment to relationships. So often when Saturn goes through the angular houses, and especially the 7th or the 10th, that's when you can actually get a solid relationship that helps you settle down. So Saturn is not all about bad things. It's about getting serious and commitment. And so that's what you want in relationships. So yeah, so Virgo, make the most of this. I think this could be a very interesting year for you to realize this tension between how you see your vision for your goals in your career, or your social reputation, your professional reputation, ambition, and how the people in your life are either hindering or supporting you in that. And this only is about adjustment. It's not a no. It's about yes, and something needs to change about this to get where you want to go. Jupiter is where you want to go in general. Because it's there at the top of your chart, you have big, big ideas at this moment. Saturn might be saying, have you thought about this? But it's a temporary readjustment. Don't think of it as a no. So good luck with all that. And Virgo, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. And Libra, we're going to see this happening in your 9th house and your 6th house. So this could very much be related to your sense of purpose, your vision for your overall purpose in life, especially because now Mercury is retrograding back into your 11th house of the future, your dreams and hopes for the future. The sun is already there in very strong dignity throughout most of August, and it's giving you a lot of emphasis too on this sense of what am I here for? What is my vision for the future? Now, Venus is in your 12th house. So there could be something here that again is what you're needing to understand about either friends who are not friends or relationships that are not serving you. Now, remember that Venus is also your ruler. She is ruling also the South Node as it's going through your 1st house. You need to change something about the way that you are in relationship with people, and potentially also the people themselves. At this time. So that's been a big theme since July 2023, going all the way through till the end of 2024, mid-January 2025. That's part of this theme. Listen to the introduction, because we're talking about these bigger themes as the South Node is going to move into your 12th house and pull the North Node into your 6th house, changing the way your everyday life looks. So any need for you to change how you intervene or how you deal with relationships or how you deal with work in general is a very important thing. This may be about a health issue, Venus in the 12th, Saturn in the 6th, Neptune in the 6th. If there's some niggly health thing, you'll want to pay attention to that. Saturn in the 6th can really be helpful for you. Usually you want those harsh planets. Saturn especially is helpful in the 6th because it gets stuff done around your health. Neptune in the 6th can have you wondering why you feel healthy. Now they're unhealthy, perhaps, potentially, if that's the case. And because Neptune can be where you are, there's a kind of psychosomatic cause. A psychosomatic cause doesn't mean that it's not real, what you're experiencing. It means that the the causal, let's say the reason for the illness is actually either emotional or psychological at its root. Now, Ayurveda would say that most illness is starting this way. The Western, more mechanistic way of looking at the body says that the symptoms are the illness, and that is where Neptune can be used in a way that's helpful when you understand the process of understanding illness is to try and understand how am I feeling around what's going on. Saturn rules your house of emotions and feeling, rules your house of the your needs, your sense of security or otherwise, and your feeling nature, the fourth house. Your early psychology, your early childhood, and that Saturn in the sixth house, especially there with the Neptune, is maybe showing you that this is an opportunity to clear out old ways of feeling about yourself or how the emotional impact of relationships or your experience of life is actually helping or hindering your health. Now, the moon rules your 10th house of the world outside as well. And that lunar energy is part of the symbolism of the fourth house. And we have the moon ruled by Jupiter in your third house of the mind at this time, and Jupiter is in the ninth house. So the moon in the house of the mind is very busy. You can look for also nervous disorders. If there is something that is bothering you about your health, look in terms of nervous disorders, anxiety, overwork, dear Libra, which is again a big pattern that Libras have, overgiving, overwork, which is very strong when you have Saturn and Neptune in the sixth house. So where can you pull it back? The Venus in the 12th can also be really helpful in this case in terms of retreat, going into retreat. It's also bed pleasures, by the way. Venus rules your eighth house and she's in the 12th. So the eighth house of intimacy, marriage partners and so on. So, enjoy that. Venus will soon be in your first house. Making you feel fantastic and positive about yourself as you kind of glow up with the Venus in her place, in her happy place, in your first house in Libra. That will come in September mostly. So while you're enjoying a moment of retreat, perhaps you can prepare yourself for that. So that square between Jupiter and Saturn overall has a lot to do with your sense of purpose. But that sense of purpose for you has a lot to do with your role in relationship. And that might be affecting either your health is the impediment to how you want to show up in the world or your vision for your sort of expansion or vision for life, potentially also travel. Or it's the everyday stuff and the work that is the obstacle, and that requires the adjustment. Either way, it's about finding a choice that works for you, Libra. Now, keep in mind, this is a longer term thing. It's not just August, but it's a longer term thing because you want to build up a sense of longer term health as well as longer term satisfaction in terms of your everyday life with that Saturn going through the sixth. So it could be that it feels temporarily like a big slog, like a lot of work or like a lot of effort, but it's going to lead to a better place. Saturn works very well for Libra, so um, you'll be making the most of it. Saturn is helpful because it brings you that structure where Libra tends to leave decisions to other people or think more about other people, um, and try and accommodate, try and find that middle ground, but it ends up making you feel annoyed. And so use that Saturn energy and try to understand what needs to change so I can get to this place, the ninth house place of my vision for what I'm here for, my higher vision. And also keep in mind, Jupiter for a woman is the spouse. There could be, and that can be about a second or third marriage, the ninth house. So there could be something there as well that might be changing you, especially as you have the North Node in your seventh house, new relationship. So that'll apply to some of you. I'd have to see your chart. So don't bank on that if that is not your case, right? So Libra, make the most of that. Sun, Moon, and Rising. It applies to all of you. Read in the description box below this video how the Sun, Moon, and Rising sign apply. Okay? Make the most, and I'll see you in the next video. Scorpio, this is happening from your eighth house, which is a familiar place where your ruler is currently sitting with Jupiter, and it's in a square to your fifth house where Saturn is. Now, if Saturn going through the fifth house can have you feeling a little bit cramped emotionally, you may not feel very, you might find your emotional expression either a little bit restricted, or there may be distance between you and a loved one, or there may be a sense of not being able to access your creative expression or your heart expression. It requires some restructuring. There may be a sense also that you're finding it more difficult just to have fun, have happiness. There's a feeling of, since March 2023, of things not being exactly where you want them to be, either in terms of love or in terms of creativity or in terms of just enjoyment of life. The fifth house is also hobbies. It's also a house of learning and education. And that might be something that feels a little bit, there may be some restriction around that. This might have something to do with children or your place of home. Saturn rules your fourth house, rules your third house of siblings as well. And so we always want to think of those significations as how they're being affected. Now, Jupiter is ruling your fifth house from the eighth house of intimacy, where it is from May 2024 until June 2025. So there's a lot of energy around marriage partners, around money that you get from others, or resources from others, or even sort of support in general from others. Mars is there, again, your ruler is there with Jupiter at the moment. So there might be a big push here. There might be a lot going on around that. But it seems somehow to be blocked, but in some way, shape, or form by that Saturn in the fifth. Now, Saturn is trining your first house of self, and it's trining your ninth house of your vision for your life, your overall sense of desire. It also relates to travel and so on, higher learning and so on. So that's actually favorable, and it can be that this is a good time to make longer term plans. So it's not entirely bad. Saturn is trinal to you, so that's very helpful, especially for the ascendant sign, but this also applies by derivative houses to the moon and the sun. So, so that whatever the thing that is blocking is coming from a need to readjust your sense of what brings you joy. Maybe you're kind of outgrowing certain things. It's kind of like, yeah, I've been there, done that. Don't want any more of this. And it can also be that there's a need to add to your intimate life. Now, often with Mars in the eighth, it can be very passionate. It is your ruler after all. It can be very passionate, very interesting for love. But there can also be tension and conflict. Mercury is retrograding. Mercury is retrograding between your 11th and 10th houses. So the 11th house of your future and friendships and your gains from, let's say, the thing that you do, usually mostly for people who work for themselves as opposed to employees. Where that tends to come from the second house, but it can be in general the gains that you get from the work that you do, and so that's something also where, let's say, if you are an entrepreneur, this can be very interesting because it can be a very useful, productive time that you actually get some real benefit, but you have to put the hard work in. Now, with Saturn in the fifth house, you're establishing something that is lasting, especially if you're starting up a job or let's say an entrepreneurial enterprise based on something you enjoy. It's like your the pleasure of the enjoyment is not so much in the doing of the thing, but it's in creating the structure that allows you to keep doing that permanently. So this is a period of time. It's not the rest of your life, unless you have Saturn there. But this is something that you can actually work in a very beneficial way towards. So that's something very, very useful in this period of time. Now, whatever the Jupiter-Mars thing is, there may be some conflict or like setting yourself up for expectation around money that should be coming in, or money that you get from a spouse, for example, or money that you get from an organization, a government, something that comes back to you that requires some adjustment based on the fifth house. Again, which is about self-expression, creative expression, children, love, joy, etc. Venus is in the 11th, which can be very helpful, but she's not in great dignity. So she's ruled by that Mercury retrograding. So it's still Venus. Venus is still helpful, so it's still really good there. But it just means that you may not be able to rely specifically on your friends. This is the other aspect of Scorpio, where because you have Mercury ruled 11th house, you might always find that you're never really sure about your friends. That's one of the reasons that the Scorpio rising can feel a little paranoid, or Scorpio in general can feel a little paranoid and often a little secretive because they're not so sure that they can trust their friends, because Mercury in the 11th, Mercury ruling the 11th, is not entirely trustworthy friends. People can be a little bit what we call two-faced, for example. That's also Mars in Gemini. That's part of that story. Right. Oh, right. So I would need to see your natal chart to be able to be more clear on this, but I think you get the picture. There's something here that is both positive but also delayed, but it's based on something ideally that you're working towards with a vision, because it's trining your house. It's a vision for yourself. Mars is in conjunct your first house. It's a quincunx, or it's not in aspect traditionally. So there's a lot of adjustment required, and it may not be evident to you until finally Mars hits your 10th house, and that will be November. November into December, as Mars is going to go back and forth into your 10th and back into your 9th. Remember, that's going to have something to do with your new sense of career, ambition, and drive. Right. So we'll leave it at that. So Scorpio, good luck with this, and I'll see you in the next video. And Sagittarius, we have this happening in your house of relationship. Your ruler, Jupiter, is in your house of relationship. It's especially true for the rising sign, or the ascendant sign, but this is also true for Sagittarius, Sun and Moon. Look in the description box below the video to see how that all pans out. And so this square that's coming from Sagittarius or rather coming from Jupiter in the 7th house, which is squaring Saturn in your 4th house, requires some kind of adjustment that may require moving, or it may be about a home that you live in, or maybe about a need for you to adjust how you relate to the loved one, your partner, business partner, or work partner, or life partner. Jupiter, especially for a woman, can represent the life partner. With Mars there may be some need to deflect, or to deal with some kind of energy of aggression or tension, or sexual tension. Why not? I mean, it doesn't always have to be bad. Depends on your natal chart, of course, because that Mars rules your 5th house of love. It rules your house of creative expression and joy, and trying to find your way forward. Your way of going forward can be something to do with children. Potentially, the North Node transiting is there in your 5th house for quite some time to come, till mid-January of 2025. Then the North Node moves into your 4th house, with the South Node moving into the 10th. So whatever's going on here with Saturn, pay a lot of attention to it, because something new is coming in. So if there's something that's not right, if there's something that feels uncomfortable, or if there feels like there's a big adjustment to be made in relationships so that you can find this place of security and comfort and what makes you feel happy, work hard on it and take it seriously, so that you can take advantage when the North Node goes into your 4th. You can start to really feel, now I'm ready for this new thing, because Saturn has already established the terrain. Saturn going through the 4th house is not so straightforward. It's not very easy. It can have you feeling potentially a wee bit depressed. It can have you feeling deflated, frustrated. Now, Neptune has been in your 4th since March 2011, the first time I think it went in. And that can also create a feeling of fragility around your emotions, or fragility around your psychological nature, or confusion around, where do I even live? That may have also had a very strong impact on some of you. Saturn is going in there now for the first time since Neptune has gone in there, and Saturn goes in and says, let's sort this out. Let's make this mean something. Let's give this legs, as it were. So you're investing in something right now with Saturn going through the 4th that is actually going to have a long-term consequence for the next, say, 14 years or so. that will show up then in your 10th house. You get the result 14, 15 years down the road. Whatever's going on now in terms of the relationship energy with the Jupiter there, Jupiter Mars squaring this Saturn, you will see from the Saturn point of view when Saturn enters into your 7th house in 7 years' time. So whatever this is, it may involve something that feels uncomfortable. Letting go of relationships, letting go of people in your life that don't make sense anymore, doesn't relate well, or it is no longer who you are now, and it's time for that to change. To let that go with a sense that you are building something for the long term going forward. Your ruler in the 7th house is going to have a lot of you pulled into relationship energy, but you don't have to be. Don't put on that happy fake smile, Sagittarius. You don't have to show up in the world and pretend that you're happy when you're not happy. So you have to be real now. With Saturn in the 4th house, you want to get real because Uranus is going to go into your 7th house and put a lot of change in your relationship house. So the more you can do the housekeeping in terms of what do I need? How do I need to establish my house and home, my foundation for life, my physical foundation, my emotional foundation, my psychological foundation. What do I need? And the more that you do that now, when Uranus goes into your 7th, it will bring you different people. It will bring you new opportunities rather than bringing chaos in your relationships, rather than throwing things in turmoil. Right? What else can I say about that? Right. So Mercury, which is ruling your 7th house, ruling that Mars and Jupiter conjunction, keeping in mind Jupiter rules the 4th house where your Saturn is, and it's ruling you, the 1st house. So that Mercury is part of this story, and it's giving you a lot of food for thought at this moment, at this time, between what do you feel is your purpose? How do you see your sense of why you're here? And how does that express itself in your career, in the work that you do? Pulling it in also potentially through your social status, meaning am I single? Am I married? Am I whatever, a teacher? I mean, you're a natural teacher, so that's kind of there. But am I, what's the quality that I'm bringing out in the world, and what is my ambition around that? Venus is bringing you some support, even though she's not in a happy place for Venus, but she's bringing you a lot of support. You have anyway changed quite a lot of your dreams with the South Node in the 11th for the last year or so. You've changed your vision for what you thought you were going to have in the future. And now you're putting a lot more attention on what do you need for yourself. So again, don't put the happy face on for other people. Find the happy place inside you, Sagittarius. And Sagittarius is known for this questing and looking, seeking. And Saturn at the moment is saying, look right at home, look inside, look in the middle of the space that you call your heart and find what you are seeking there. And listen to the introduction where I'm talking about the Christ consciousness and this unfortunate or immature need for a savior. You are your savior, Sagittarius. You are what you're looking for. And with Saturn in the 4th, this is the opportunity you have to find it. So there we are. Good luck with that, Sagittarius, and I'll see you in the next video. And Capricorn. So this Jupiter squaring Saturn is happening from your house of work and into your house of choice and goals, and 3rd house of how you connect with people, your neighbors, the people around you, the people that you know by name or they know you by name. You might describe that as the place of communication as well, how you interact with people, exchanges of all kinds. So there's something going on here where there's a desire for things to change around work, that you have a new sense of choice. Your ruler, Saturn, is in the 3rd house, a new sense of goal or a new desire to connect, a new way of connecting with people, and it feels frustrating at the moment. So you personally feel frustrated as your ruler is retrograding. Well, Jupiter is with Mars. Now, Mars is the exaltation ruler of Capricorn. So when Mars exalts, for Capricorn now. It's not exalted in Jupiter, but Mars is very strong for Capricorn, meaning that you can use that Mars to great purpose. And the Jupiter that's with the Mars in your sixth house of everyday work choices, work choices, meaning not the house of choices, but the house of what you do around work with the Mars there. Your ambitions and your drives, your sense of what needs to be done. There's obviously quite a lot going on at work for you, or with colleagues, or with employees, or with people that have to do work for you of some kind, or other contractual obligations, for example. There's something here that is being slowed down by Saturn. You're being asked to slow it down. So that's the mind also. The third house is the mind. So it's where do I need to reconsider something? Where do I need to pull it back or communicate in a different way? Where do I need to show up in a way that is more considered, more thoughtful in terms of how I'm making these choices based on how my mind is actually working for me or not. Now, Jupiter's all over the place in Gemini, and again, ruling that third house of mind. It's also ruling your 12th house of the unconscious mind. So while it's in the sixth house, you may not even really be aware of how much your own attitudes or your own expression or your own way of showing up in your everyday life is actually part of the problem that you think is coming from the outside. There you have it, Capricorn. You may not be aware of how you are contributing to your own suffering. And this is because of that energy there of Jupiter. So you want to maybe use this opportunity as a wake-up call where you can recognize I'm pulling this back and I'm recognizing how my mind is working. How am I communicating? Is that effective for me? Am I able to communicate in a way that is constructive? Remember that Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication is a really helpful tool. You can find lots of videos on YouTube. You can find all kinds of information through books. NVC, or nonviolent communication, is a really important way of using this energy right now. As you've got this conjunction with Mars, Jupiter squaring Saturn, from the place of the everyday, it's a place where you're really needing to readjust, and this can also be because of issues around health, by the way. But if you have if health is a problem at this time, I would like you to explore how your sense of your emotional nature, your need for security, your need to potentially to be right, the need for connection when you actually find yourself disconnecting, is actually causing some of the stress in your physical or mental health. I'd need to see your natal chart to find out more about that. We've got Chiron and the North Node going through your fourth house of what makes you feel safe, secure, grounded, stable. That can also be about property. So you may be feeling that everything is just way too unmanageable at this time. And also because the nodal axis is squaring your first house of self. Now, by degree, that will depend on your natal chart. But even by sign, it's squaring your first house and your seventh house. So there's a lot that you're having to reflect on in terms of changing how you are, how partners work with you, your partnerships in general. And certainly with the South Node in your 10th house, you're even, for the last year, you have been questioning your career ambitions and goals and putting a lot more attention on home and your personal needs, what you need and want for your own well-being, which is good. It's a good thing for you. So have a look at the introduction, because then the North Node will be moving into your third house of all of these things that Saturn is representing right now, communication and siblings and extended family and your neighborhood and so on. So that's where all of your energy goes as of 2025, but already in September, you're going to get a glimpse of that. So this is a potential opportunity for you to recognize how you might want to engage contractually with people, or in terms of a new way of setting a goal, either short or long term, for your career. And then remember that next year, 2025, and especially permanently from, or at least for 7 years from 2026, you've got Uranus moving into the sixth house, changing your everyday, changing potentially around whatever health situation you have, and changing your work environment. So this is where you can set yourself up for those changes that are inevitable coming down the pipeline. Right, so there you are, Capricorn, and yeah, make the most of that. I think you will, and I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, dear Aquarius, of course, you are under an enormous amount of pressure already because of that Pluto in your first house, but Saturn, which is also your ruler, is squaring Jupiter from the second house of earned income and resources and finances and support that you might get. It's your family and the people, the things in general that support you. That's in a square to Jupiter and Mars in your fifth house. Now, the Jupiter-Saturn square is long. It's a long-standing thing. It goes for several months. You can watch the introduction to see how that pans out for all of us in a general way. But that Jupiter-Saturn square is about finding that the growth that you want is somehow constrained. It keeps coming back and forth in terms of expansion, contraction. In your case, from the fifth house of your self-expression and your sense of what you want, how you might want to move forward, even in terms of love potentially as well, and how the second house of your values or your things that might support you, the things that are maybe financially or morally supporting you, they're somehow restrained at this time. So there's a restriction around these things that requires you to make an adjustment between the second house and the fifth house. This could be something to do with children. You know, potentially there's something here maybe about your kids that is requiring you either to invest more money or spend more money, or maybe you are investing because you're deciding you might want to have a better long-term financial viability, for example. That's an ongoing thing with the Saturn in the second. It could be also that your resources are feeling a little restricted. Now, you do have a lovely, helpful Venus there in your eighth house. Even if she's not in super great dignity, she's still Venus and still very helpful. And so you have some kind of support coming through, perhaps from women or from your mom. Venus rules your fourth house of family and your original, like your childhood or your family that you grew up in, your lineage. And so there may be some help there if you are getting money from perhaps an inheritance or perhaps some kind of payoff of some kind. That brings some help. Now, Mercury is retrograde, and Mercury started its retrograde there in the eighth house. So that Mercury is what's ruling the Jupiter-Mars conjunction in your fifth. And Mercury is also ruling your, yeah, of course, the eighth. So the fifth and the eighth. Yeah, it could be there's some need or desire for creative new enterprise, and that Mercury is having you might need to reassess partnerships around the enterprise. Mars rules your 10th house and it's there in the fifth house. Now, this could be about starting a business on your own. This would be, by the way, really helpful. This could also be why Saturn could restrict your finances in the second house for a little while. Pluto going in your first says, hey, this is who I am, this is who I'm becoming now. An entrepreneur. I'm going to take on this role of entrepreneur. The North Node will go into your second house of your own resources that you're creating, the money that you have, putting a lot of emphasis there. So it's a good time if you're looking to do that kind of work on your own, expanding in your own way. The Jupiter, the Uranus, to be correct, Jupiter-Uranus conjunction of the 20th of April, 20th, 21st of April was in your fourth house. So that could also bring you these new ideas around working from home or around property, working with property, etc. Yeah, do think about this potential things that need to be resolved between partners, because that will help you also to plan going forward for your future, planning what is the better way to go forward with the help of somebody else. So this looks like what it might be for our friends who have either the sun, moon, or ascendant in Aquarius. Definitely an opportunity for change because we have a square there between the Mars and, between the Mercury and Uranus in your fourth. So change that might even involve a change of residence, but a change of relationship energy that could be partnerships of all kinds. So you're the person across the table from you, right? But this is actually, it can be very constructive, but keeping in mind that just for the moment, you may need to hold on around making a final decision around work or partnerships or even a new love affair. So if you meet somebody with this kind of energy, that can be challenging, it might be that they live somewhere else, they live far away, you're not able to fully, embrace what it is that you could develop as a relationship. So, all right, I'm just gonna have to pause the video for the dogs here for a moment. All right, so dogs are now at my feet. So who knows? I re just realized now it's been a very long time for them. So Aquarius, I just wanted to finish up by saying that if you feel that there's a lot of restriction around money at this time, it's about getting serious about your money. Don't think of this as that this is not accessible to you. It's about being creative. Express yourself creatively, find creative solutions, find ways of growing through entrepreneurial projects, creative projects, or if it's an investment, for example, around your children and their education, or around property and this kind of thing that you want to invest long term in something, then it's normal that Saturn should make you feel a little bit tight on money or resources of some kind. But it is an opportunity for you also to really get clear around how you manage your money, and especially what do I feel are my values. Saturn in Jupiter ruled Pisces in your second house. It's really getting clear. What do I believe? What are my values? And how do I live through them or not? All right. So Aquarius, make the most of this time. And I wish you every success. And I'll see you in the next video. Oopsie, I'm going to have to just swap this around, Pisces, because we somehow missed you. There we are. So the timing doesn't always align by the hour. So here we now have Pisces, Sun, Moon, and Rising, where we find Saturn, and Saturn has been there for you for since March 2023, restructuring yourself, having a sense of needing to be more serious about life, needing to take on responsibility around yourself and how you participate in your life, how you might be working, living, relating in general. So this is the restructuring and stabilizing a lot of your main aspects of life for Pisces. For any time that Saturn goes in the quadrant houses, first, fourth, seventh, 10th, it's very important, but especially in the first house, it's really about you and how you're showing up in a different way. Or let's say us, because I have a Pisces stellium, and this also happens to be my second Saturn return. So I'm right in the ring with you. And this Saturn is ruled by Jupiter, which is in the fourth house with Mars, and it's squaring. And that tension of square is extremely powerful in August, but it continues really until next June. This is a very long, extended period of squaring energy between Saturn and Jupiter. It will be exact again, the square between Saturn and Jupiter around the 24th, 25th of December, what many people celebrate as Christmas. And I was saying in the introduction, Christmas is supposed to be a celebration of Christ, and Pisces represents that. It represents the Christ consciousness, which is not the historical figure of Jesus. It is the consciousness that we are. So this could be very, very personal as a message to Pisces in general, and how you relate to yourself, because Jupiter in the fourth house is putting a lot of emphasis on your foundation, what makes you happy, what do you need in life, giving you a lot of an expansive sense of what is available to you in terms of literally physically where you live, where home is for you. A lot of Pisces do very well having two different qualities around home at the very least, or having a very busy home potentially with the energy of Gemini there in the fourth house, or having two homes. This is what I've chosen to do. I have my place in Spain, and then I live in the north of Europe the rest of the year. So this is one way that can look. In the ideal. It's not as easy as it seems on the surface, but we're working out the bugs. That's the Saturn square Jupiter for me, for example, working out the details of how that all comes together, and hopefully giving that a long-term flavor with the Saturn in the first house, looking for long-term structural change. Um, And that, of course, implies a certain constraint. So there may be some things around yourself or around what you're capable of, Saturn in the first house, that are holding you back from what you want and what you'd hope for with the Jupiter in the fourth house. This can also be around where and how you work because that Jupiter, Mars in the fourth house can also be about working from home. This can be part of the story of the Pluto moving into your 12th house as well, where Pluto moves into the background of your chart on a spiritual or psychological level. That can be very much a restructuring or a deeper awareness of what's going on in your unconscious mind, in the recesses of your mind, in your house of self-undoing as well. So trying to get rid of any patterns of things that are unhelpful. Well, Saturn is certainly going to be showing you where you might be bumping up against any of that, but also where you find that the Jupiter that rules you, Pisces, from the fourth house is showing you how you can work from home, one way of looking at that, or how your sense of home can expand. Now, with Mars there at this particular time, it will require a lot of adjustment and action, and maybe even some tension. Mars requires some kind of struggle or an energy that is posing a challenge, especially because Mars in the sign of friends or in the sign of connection, communication can cause some kind of friction. So there may be some tension around that as you're going through all of these changes. So it depends on every individual how that might pan out. But one way or another, it's bringing dynamism into the mix. You can certainly get benefits from what it is that you're doing or where you're living from the home, through house and home, literal physical home, house and home. Mars is the area Mars rules the area of your money, and Mars also rules your ninth house of your sort of sense of purpose. And so Mars there with Jupiter is expanding your sense of how to earn money, how to maybe use ways of earning money to expand your income and also to expand your vision for yourself. So Mars is ruling the North Node that's going through your second house. So there's clearly new sources of income that are coming up as well. So Mercury, which is ruling the fourth house for Pisces, it's also in your seventh house, ruling your seventh house where it went retrograde. So there's something here also about how you're connecting in relationship or how relationships are connecting with the work that you do or where the place that you live, for example. Mercury rules that Jupiter for now. It's also ruling Venus, which is passing through the seventh house. And so there's something here that needs negotiating, renegotiating, conversations or discussions around that can be about your everyday work or health habits or your actual relationships and friendships. This may be part of the story. So Saturn, which rules your 11th house also of your gains from what you do, and also gains from what you do, but also friendships and connections, groups that you have, is relying on you. That means Saturn in the first house requires your input, a restructuring so that you can see the gains and the vision that you have for your future. So you can see that materialize somehow. So this ongoing square here with your ruler in the fourth is going to last right through till June of next year. So the Saturn in your first house of self is squaring Jupiter. So you and where you live, you and how you feel about that, you and how you connect with people in your house of home, it's going to be in this kind of tug of war for a little while. But it's going to clarify things and it will bring benefit because Jupiter is a great benefic. It does rule you and it becomes very important how it actually manifests in your chart. Jupiter then in June next year will square Saturn from your house of money from your fifth house of joy, pleasure, hobbies, love, creativity, entrepreneurship to the second house where Saturn and Neptune will be as of June next year. So that square continues, it finishes off then in June 2025. So you're preparing for that. And then Jupiter is in very strong dignity in a trine to your first house. So it's strong in its house of in Cancer in the fifth house, where it loves to be anyway. Jupiter loves being in the fifth house, and it loves being in the sign of Cancer, which is its exaltation sign, and it's your ruler. So next year, whatever this square represents is going to bring you, again, some quality of benefit. The Saturn and Neptune moving into your second house is going to show you how you need to restructure around income, family, home, and it's all part of the story that the North Node is already bringing you. But then the North Node swaps with Saturn and Neptune. The North Node goes into your first house, and then Saturn and Neptune go into your second house. So you're tying in all of the things that you've learned this year into what's happening in 2025 and beyond. All right, Pisces, make the most of it, and I'll see you in the next video.